Hello there, welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground. Whilst many of Star Wars' recent games have been standalone stories, the original games were often based on the movies themselves, and Star Wars Episode 1 had an abundance of video games based on it. So many, in fact, that many people often forget that there was a video game titled after the movie itself. And today, we're going to take a little look at it. So welcome to our retro review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace on the PlayStation 1. I say the PlayStation 1, full disclosure before we go any further, I played this game on the PlayStation 5. It's a port from the PlayStation Plus store. However, I also had never played it on the original PlayStation. So anything I point out in this that isn't quite applicable to the original, maybe it's a part of a dodgy port or something, please do bear that in mind. However, that said, let's have a look at this little game. Released as an action-adventure game in 1999, Star Wars The Phantom Menace allows you to take the role of 4 different characters throughout the course of the game. Of course, it is the Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn that are going to be the most entertaining. People inevitably like to play using lightsabers and having force powers after all. But you will also get to play as Captain Tanaka and Queen Amidala at different points in the game. It just depends what's most appropriate for the story, and it does try to follow the story of the film relatively closely. You'll also get to interact with other characters, such as Darth Maul, Jar Jar Binks, etc. as you work your way through the levels and through the story itself. The game does a very good job of copying scenes and set pieces from the movie. However, of course, it does embellish and stretch these out to make them into full levels for a game. The level designs themselves are very recognisable, and you can usually tell which part of the movie you're currently in. Whilst the camera angles are not always ideal and can be a little bit jarring depending on the levels, overall they're serviceable. And the cutscenes themselves for the original PlayStation are really quite good. These have aged quite well and are still quite pleasant to look at even now. Quite frankly, the CGI for the computer game has aged pretty much as well as the CGI did for the movie itself, but that's another story. So, how was this game received when it was first released back in 1999? Well, the game was released on the PC and the PlayStation, but it is the original PlayStation version that we're reviewing here. And unfortunately, whilst the PC version got fairly mixed results but with some quite good scores, the PlayStation version wasn't received quite as kindly. Game Informer magazine gave it 7.25 out of 10, which is relatively reasonable. However, nobody else gave it above 62%. It also got a score of 4% from one publication and only 1 star out of 5 elsewhere. It wasn't particularly positively received. But why? Well, some of the criticism seems a little unfair to me. There are comments that it doesn't really add anything to the action-adventure genre, and that it can become a little bit repetitive, with the vast majority of the opponents being droids, but that's exactly what happened in the film. Also, this isn't a game that's claiming its attempt to reinvent the genre, so should that really be held against it? There were also criticisms that the puzzles within the game are far too simplistic, and therefore it would only appeal to people who are fans of the movie itself. Isn't that who the game was made for, though? And yes, the puzzles being quite simplistic is a fair point. However, The Phantom Menace was very much a far more child-focused film than some of the other Star Wars films. Therefore, the game's going to be the same too. So, even that criticism seems a little unfair. However, there are 2 points that I do think hold weight. Firstly is Edge magazine. that point out after the complexity and depth of the previous Star Wars games, especially the Jedi Knight games, this feels quite weak and perhaps a little bit lethargic. And that is a valid point. We had seen some fantastic Star Wars games prior to this one, and by comparison, this one felt like a little bit of a lazy tie-in. Another comment is about how the issues of the game are the same as the issues of the film. It feels like we could have done with a lot more Jedi and a fair bit Darth Maul, a little bit less of the wandering around, not really doing anything too exciting. That was a problem with the film, and unfortunately it's followed it into the game. And if we bring modern scrutiny into this, how does it hold up now? Well, the reality is, I think a lot of the problems I personally have with this game now, I would have had with it if I'd played it way back then. First of all, I actually think the graphics and look of the game are pretty cool, and being able to explore some of these areas was quite fun. However, the gameplay and camera angles are clunky at best. It feels so awkward walking around sometimes, and the controls feel really like they're working against you rather than working with you. Sometimes just walking across a simple bridge can feel like an absolute chore. There's every chance you're just going to fall off. It just doesn't seem to be working with you. On a positive note, the visuals are fine for a PlayStation 1 game, and the Jedi and lightsabers themselves look pretty cool. The audio in it is also fantastic, with great music, and of course the fact that they randomly throw in the music video for Duel of the Fates into the disc is a fantastic bonus. The cutscenes are visually very impressive, especially when you think how old this game is. I think some of the criticism from earlier is a bit harsh. It's not claiming to be one of the greatest, most revolutionary action-adventure games ever, and if you find it a little bit too simple, maybe it's because the game is designed to be accessible for children also. I think the idea that it might only appeal to people who are fans of the film is also kinda ridiculous. Who the hell did you think the game was made for? Overall, I think the criticism this game got on its release is only partly justified. Yes, it's nothing revolutionary, and it's not the best Star Wars game ever made. Heck, it's not even one of the best Star Wars games made for this movie. But on its own, it's still a decent little title, and kind of fun to play. I think a 6 out of 10 is about fair. Sometimes you have to overcome the dodgy camera angles and controls in order to try and enjoy the game, but the fact that I continued trying to enjoy the game probably says enough. Is that because it's a game worth trying to enjoy? Maybe. Is it just because I'm a Star Wars fan, so that's who it's made for? Also maybe, but that is who it's made for. So there we have it. Until next time, take the high ground.